when I first got to Vietnam, when I first arrived, which was in April of '67. And I arrived in Cam Ranh Bay, and we had just come over from the United States. And the flight over was, we stopped in Japan. There was snow on the ground. It was cool in the airplane, of course. And when they opened the door, everybody has a story about when they opened the door on the plane and you landed in Vietnam. Um, the thing I noticed was it was really hot and humid as soon as they opened the door, and that was like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So we spent a couple days at Cam Ranh Bay until they got around to assigning us to a unit. And during that time, it was hot and very humid, and I thought, boy, I wonder if I'm going to be able to stand the heat and all. But they had a trailer parked out there by these barracks they had there at Cam Ranh Bay with water in it, and it wasn't cool, of course. It was just 100-degree water, like it was at temperature outside, and we would go there quite often to drink some water, to get some water. And I thought, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. But as time went on, as I was in Vietnam longer and longer, you become more accustomed to the heat and you don't require quite as much water. But people are going to say, well, you were in Vietnam and there were rice paddies and streams and even creeks, rivers, and waterfalls. In fact, one day we were going through the jungle and there was a beautiful waterfall there, and I took a picture of that. Why didn't you just fill your canteens and get your drinking water wherever you came across water? And that's what we did. I always was very religious about putting some halazone tablets in the water whenever I filled up my canteens. And they would fly water into us. If we were in an area where we didn't have access to any water, they would fly cans of water in, usually in the evening, and you'd fill up your canteens and stuff for the next day. But the guys back at the base camp weren't always real good about closing the water containers when they would come back in, and there was dust flying around there at the landing zone and stuff. And sometimes you'd open a container of water to fill your canteen, and there would be worms crawling around in the bottom of the can, which isn't real cool. So anyway, I would always put a halazone tablet in, usually whenever I filled my canteen, unless I was out in the jungle somewhere and I was dying of thirst, and I would fill it out of a creek or something. We had been in the Bong Song Plain area where there were streams and creeks and rivers, and word was passed down that we were going to be going up into the hills for a long, extended mission. We were not going to be resupplied, and they wanted us to be up into the Central Highlands, more or less as a listening post. And this was like going to be a company-sized air assault up into the hills, and we were going to go further then after the air assault and just remain out of contact, but watch the valley and see what's going on below. So anyway, they said take extra water along because we're not going to get resupplied up there. We may be up there a week or a week and a half. So I usually carried 2 canteens on my web gear. And that particular day, since they said take extra water along, I had a collapsible plastic canteen that I carried in my pack, empty all the time. But that day I went ahead and filled it up. And we were by a muddy river down there in the Bong Song Plains, and we were all filling up our canteens, getting ready to make an air assault. And there was a little old Vietnamese woman there along the riverbank. I don't know if she was fishing or what she was doing, but she saw us filling up our canteens there in the muddy river water. And so she couldn't speak English and we couldn't speak Vietnamese, but she came over and said like this, no, don't fill your canteens like that, or don't drink that water like that. And she took us over by the riverbank there where it was sandy and gravelly, and she had an empty sea ration can, and she scooped out a little hole in the sand and with her sea ration can, and she kept scooping the water out of the sand, which was muddy at first, but as she continued to scoop the water out of the sand, it became clearer and clearer because the water was filtering in through the sand and gravel. And we thought, boy, that's pretty cool. So we all dumped out our muddy watered canteens and filled them up with the clear water that the old Vietnamese woman was showing us how to do. So we packed our extra water, and the supply helicopter came in before we made the air assault, and they dropped off a whole bunch of long-range patrol rations for us. Instead of taking C rations, which are heavy, and in order to pack enough C rations for a week and a half, you'd have a load in your pack. So anyway, they dropped off a whole bunch of long-range patrol rations, and we put those in our packs along with our extra water. And it wasn't long, and the helicopters were coming in to take us on an air assault into the high country in the Central Highlands. Now, these weren't real mountains, but they were up there. They were probably 400 meters or something like that, at least high. And when you get up into the Central Highlands, and it was hot weather, of course, and there are no streams or creeks or places to get water up there. So we made our air assault going in, and as we approached the hillside, we began receiving some ground fire from the side of the hill as we were coming in. We had 2 gunships with us, and we just happened to be on my platoon was on the first helicopter going in, and the gunships opened up on the hillside where we were getting the ground fire from, and we went on into the LZ. And when the gunships opened up on the hillside, they set the hillside on fire. It was dry brush and dry part of the time of the year. So here we are, everybody's coming in on the top of the hill, and the side of the hill's on fire, and it's like a brush fire coming up the hill, and we're trying to get everybody in there, and we're beating out bushes that are burning with our entrenching tools, and we set up there for the night on the top of the hill after we got the fire under control. And the next morning we moved out and even higher into the hillside, and remained pretty much out of radio contact, I believe, and no supply coming in. And of course it was hot and fighting the fire. Everybody was hitting the waters that they had packed and brought along with them. Well, we were up in this area for at least 4 or 5 days, and by then we were really starting to get low on our canteens that we had brought along. And of course, long-range patrol rations, the thing you have to have for them is water to make the rations edible. So every time you wanted to eat something, you had to pour some of your precious water in there so you could eat it. And after about, I think it was about 4 days or going on the 5th day, most everybody, including me, we were almost all out of water. And things become desperate. You can be out of food for an extended period of time, but when you get out of water and it's hot, that's all you think about is getting some water. You gotta have water for your body, and things got really serious. I mean, we were starting to get to the point where we weren't sweating, and the sweat that was on our jungle fatigues and stuff was just kind of salty looking. And we weren't sweating a lot. And the company commander said, we're either going to have to go down the hill or get resupplied. And finally, we made the decision that we were going to go down and try to get to water. And I mean, this was desperate. We were really getting desperate to the point where we were going to have to do something. And so we began following a little dry ravine down from the top of these big hills that we were on. We kept following the ravine, and we had probably gone down a mile or so down this ravine, and the bottom of the ravine, which was just dirt, I could see moss, little patches of moss in the dirt. And then a little further on, I saw little puddles of water along with the moss. And I saw guys in our platoon get down on their hands and knees and lap the water off of the little patches of moss that was in the creek. I mean, we were desperate. We were thirsty as could be. So anyway, we continued on down this little ravine, and the further we went, the more water we began to see, a little bit of water in this little dried up ravine. And finally, we got down far enough where there was actually a little bit of water in this ravine, and we could hear water splashing and falling. And as we went around a turn in the creek there, we saw a piece of bamboo, a large piece of bamboo that had been driven into the side of the hill, and water was pouring out of the bamboo. It was a spring in the side of the hill, and Probably some villager 100 years ago drove this in there to get water for their rice paddies or their flock or whatever they were doing. And it took all of our uh, willpower, I should say, to walk past this, go further on down the ravine to make sure we weren't walking into an ambush or a trap of some kind, while the rest of the guys from our company following us were able to get to the water and fill up their canteens and move on. So that was a
Um,
time in our career that we were really desperate for some water.
was there a concern that this bamboo coming out that had water coming out of it, was there a concern that that was a Viet Cong, kind of a Viet Cong ruse to get the soldiers to gather there and then they'd be easy targets?
Absolutely, it was in my mind, of course, and I was probably the squad leader on the point platoon going down the hill that day, and I told all of my guys, "Don't stop. We're going to go on further on down this ravine and into a larger creek area to make sure that we weren't walking into a trap. Because if everybody had throw down their rifle and start picking up their canteens, we'd be sitting ducks then.
Sure.
But there weren't. We didn't walk into a trap, and thank God we got to some water. And but it was a desperate time. It really was.
Um, One of the things I've heard is that the halazone tablets made the water taste so bad that guys would write home and ask for like Kool-Aid
Right,
packages and things like that. Did you do
right.
that?
They did. I sometimes I put Kool Aid in. Janet would send me some Kool Aid, but um, usually I just drank it. It's almost tastes like chlorinated water from the city or something, but it's not that bad. I
Yeah,
mean, I was in Boy Scouts years ago and in Explorer Scouts, and we used that when we were on extended hikes up in the woods, in Boy Scouts. But
yeah.
it's not all that bad. It's kind of an iodine chlorine taste.
And if when you're on this operation in the Highlands, if you can't get supply, does that also mean that you couldn't get medevaced?
Probably, I don't know what would happen if we'd actually walked into a firefight up in the hills, but I think they must have received orders that they didn't want any helicopters going in and out or anything resupplying us. They wanted us to remain con- concealed as much as you can conceal a company up in the upper mountains, so that we could visually see the valley down below, a long way down, and see if we could see anybody moving in that area. This was just off of the coastal plains and up into the central highlands there. We weren't all the way west in Vietnam, like up in Cambodia in that area. We've been there, but this was out closer to this South China Sea.
And you didn't have any guys fall out from heat stroke or anything. Everybody made it through.
Not that day, not from the water, but we have had people fall out from heat stroke years ago, or in that. Um, Probably during the time we were in the Quaison Valley, I saw guys actually fall out from heat stroke. And fortunately, I guess being an old Missouri boy, I guess we were used to the really hot weather and all. But uh, yeah, that heat stroke hit us one day when we were moving through an area that had been hit with napalm, and all the shrubs and everything had been burned off, and it was about 4 inches of black ash on the ground as we were moving up into this hill. And it was really, really hot anyway. And we moved walking through all this ash, and I saw guys actually fall down, and they were, we had to drag them up until we could get to a place where they could get shade.
Just one last question on the water topic. I've heard other vets talk about they'd come to, maybe the B-52 bomb crater,
Yeah,
water
right.
collected in there, and then there'd kind of be a sheen on it from Agent Orange. Did you see that yourself?
Well, I did see that, but I never drank any water out of a bomb crater. I saw water in bomb craters occasionally, and it must not have been too bad. I saw ducks swimming in the water, but um, there was a day in particular that we were crossing a little valley, and some planes went over spraying, and shortly after they sprayed, we had to cross the valley and go to the other side because they received ground fire when they were spraying. And we walked through the rice paddies and across the valley. Our whole company, we were on a company-sized mission then, and there was a sheen on the water, and of course the air and whatever rice paddy foliage and stuff around there smelled like diesel fuel to me. And I had worked in a research lab long enough to know that I wasn't going to drink water that had oil floating on the top of it. But I did see guys fill their canteens out of the rice paddy that day because it was hot again, and they reached down and filled their canteens with water with this sheen or this oil floating on it. And I didn't. I just kept walking.
And that was Agent Orange.
I guess it was. We didn't really know about Agent Orange at the
Right.
time, other than we did know that they were spraying to try to kill the rice in the rice fields, is what we thought.